Well, thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Nicole Catalfamo. I'm the Associate Director of Employer Relations, and I'm accompanied by Annette McLaughlin, Director of Career Services as well. And we are here tonight with Dominic Agostino, a Fordham College Rose Hill alum and Global Head of HR at, Global Lead of HR at IBM. And thank you very much, Dominic, for being here as part of the Rams Helping Rams program. We're really excited to talk with you this evening and learn more about your background and how your experience at Fordham led to where you are today.
Great, thank you.
Of course. So to get started, Dominic, can you tell us more about your career path to date and specifically include how you landed your first job out of college, how you got started in the industry that you're currently in, because I know your background is very interesting. So I'm really excited for you to share it with the grads, and tell us more about what your current role entails.
Okay. So I'll tell you, I started working when I was probably 8 years old, and that was answering phones at my dad's pizzeria. So it's all I knew, it's all I did growing up. And I'm a Fordham guy through and through, went to Fordham Prep, Fordham University, Fordham Grad. Now, ask me why I went to Fordham Grad. It was because I majored in psychology, graduated in '94, and I didn't have any practical work experience. I knew what I didn't want to do, which was I didn't want to work in a pizzeria. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was very interested in psychology. So I pursued a graduate degree because at the time in 1994, there weren't a lot of jobs for undergrad psych majors. So I went on for my master's program. I came across career counseling, and I was very infatuated with career counseling. I was like, wait a minute, you mean we can actually help people focus on their careers and guide them on their journeys? What a novel idea. So I really jumped into that, and I started to explore how can I get more experience in career counseling. So I went to my professor and I said, Professor, and I can't remember his name, I'm sorry. But I said, Professor, how do I get more experience in career counseling? And he's like, you really need to find a job in like a career planning office. So I went to Fordham's career planning office, and they knew me because I'd spent a lot of time there as a senior, and I wish I had spent a lot more time there as a freshman, sophomore, and junior. And I said, hey, can I get some hands-on work experience, counseling students? And they said, well, we really can't hire you for free, and we're not going to pay you, but if you get your professor to write a letter, then we can treat it as an internship. And so I said, great. So my professor accommodated my request. I started to work at my first internship with Fordham's career planning office, started to learn how to provide counseling, applying what I was learning. It was great. And while I was there, came across an opportunity. And the opportunity was with St. John's University, and they were looking for a career advisor. And this was around the time I was graduating with my master's, and I applied and I interviewed and they hired me. And this was my first professional job. Mind you, I was still working in the pizzeria because Dad wouldn't let me go. So I was doing two jobs. But, through my experience at St. John's University, I was there for about a year when one of my colleagues moved on to New York Institute of Technology to get a promotional opportunity running their career planning office. And about 3 months thereafter, so I'm about a year and some odd months into my career job at St. John's, the colleague reaches out, calls me up and says, hey, would love for you to come work with me because we need somebody to manage the on-campus recruitment. And you're the first person I thought of. So, and they said, it's more money. It's a longer commute. It's out in the island. And this was before Easy Pass. So we were dunking coins, throwing them into the bridge. And I was like, sure, because I'm trying to advance my career. So I go over to New York Institute of Technology. And again, the job on paper looks the same, but there's a fundamental difference between students from St. John's University and students from New York Institute of Technology. Students at St. John's University have a variety of majors from which to choose. Students at New York Tech predominantly major in one of three things: engineering or architecture or osteopathic medicine. So they're very focused on what they want to do. So there's not as much opportunity to offer career planning advice. Hence why I was more focused on-campus recruitment, bringing companies rather on campus, recruiters on campus to interview students. And while I was working with recruiters, I started to realize that they had a lot of skills that I possessed and vice versa. And what I had been learning from a career planning standpoint for about a year and a half to almost 2 years post-graduation, I could apply in a corporate setting as a recruiter. So I started to pursue opportunities in corporate America, and this is circa 1998, because I found from a career path, you have a lot more opportunities to advance very rapidly in corporate America than necessarily you do in educational America. So I started to explore recruitment opportunities, and I saw a job posted. Don't ask me what job site it was, because this was the early days of job postings on the internet. And there was a job posting for a recruiter with IBM. And IBM has always been a company I'm fond of. I used a Model 3286. I remember it fondly because I used it for 8 years through high school and college. This is before Windows, where you actually had to type load *8,1 to actually get it to run. And just to give you a perspective on how powerful that machine was, our cell phones produce probably 20 times more power than a desktop computer produced circa 1994. So it just gives you an idea of how far and how fast technology has come along. So IBM has been a very fond company for me. And I was very interested in the technology because I'm a geek at heart. So I interviewed and again, applied what I had been learning and being taught and applied through my educational experiences. And thankfully, I landed the opportunity with IBM, and that was in 1998. And so I haven't been with them since. While I've been with IBM since 1998, I actually took what I call a leave of absence in circa 2007. I got an opportunity to leave IBM and go work for the Walt Disney Company, which again was not something I looked for, but an opportunity presented itself, and it was an opportunity that I could not pass up as a fan of Disney. And my son at the time was 2 years old. So if I didn't take the opportunity, he probably would have disowned me. So I took the opportunity with Disney, and it was a great run of about 15 months. But the bad news there was that they were downsizing the organization that I was working with, which was the US consumer magazine business. And the good news was that they were moving me to Los Angeles, California. The bad news was I wasn't mobile at the time. So I got the opportunity to come back to IBM, had to compete for it. And I've been back since 2008. And in that time, I have continued to grow personally and professionally. I'm not the same person I was in 2008. I'm certainly not the same person I was in 98. And I'm definitely not the same person I was when I graduated in 1994. But it's been a wild run, and I still got a little bit left to go. So I'm aiming for 30. Right? I'm aiming for 30 years with IBM, and I got about 9 years to go before I get there.
That's such a great story. And as somebody in higher education, it really is so impressive to see how you were trying to figure out what to do with your psych degree and how you navigated higher education to HR, from IBM to Disney, now back to IBM. So it sounds like a really interesting but very engaging career path so far.
It is, and I'm actually being able to apply a lot of what I learned as a career in career counseling and as a career advisor, because one of our focus areas today in IBM is career development, and we want our employees to continue to build their skill and capabilities, because skills is the currency. I can tell you that unequivocally. Whatever industry you work in, make no mistake, it is not how hard you work, It is what you know and how well you apply it. You can be the greatest super learner known to man and learn and have a million hours of learning under your belt. But if you're not applying any of it, then that's not good. And so when we're looking at employees, we're looking at employees whose skills are relevant to IBM and the marketplace. We try to mirror the markets we serve. So we're always focusing on skills, and we provide a lot of opportunity for IBMers today to upskill and learn, and we encourage that. We want employees to learn. We actually ask employees to complete a minimum of 40 hours of learning. Most exceed that. And we actually look at it from a skills standpoint of novice to thought leadership, and especially in our sales organization, where our senior sellers, you can't even get promoted unless you meet certain requirements. So skills is the currency. So what you've learned the last 4 years in college, trust me, you're going to apply it. And if you think that, well, I know I think, Shannon, I think you said you were an English major, right? Think about the skill and capabilities you've picked up being an English major, and how that can be applied to anything, not necessarily teaching, right? But anything. So that's the key, is figuring out how to apply the skills you learn.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's something that we always talk about with students, because there's so much pressure for students to declare their major, and they declare their major and they do really well in school. And then you graduate and you don't really get to ask that question as much anymore. Like, what's your major? Because they're more focused on the skill set, the transferable skills that you could take from position to position. So you've definitely highlighted that very nicely as well.
Yeah, I remember when they asked me to declare my major was actually biology. So while I graduated with a major in psychology, I remember my story, right? I worked in the pizzeria, so I had no real practical hands-on experiences, right? I knew what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to work in a pizzeria. Hindsight being 2020 now, I always say to my wife, why didn't I pursue, business management? I could have taken the pizzeria and expanded it. Why didn't I become a chef? And she goes, well, you're not that great in the kitchen, so forget about the chef. But, my point was, I didn't really appreciate what I was learning, because my dad would always say to me, I want you to be in an office. I want you to have an office job. So he painted this picture for me where the pizzeria was bad, where that wasn't his intention, right? He just wanted, like every parent wants their child to be more successful than they are. And I always say to this day, I'm like, Dad, you were pretty successful, because, last I checked, the cash business for 30 years is a remarkable accomplishment. So, but then he always reminds me of all the burns that he had on his arm, which, the sweat and the tears that went along with it. But my point is, you don't really appreciate when you're asked to declare a major. And my major that I first declared was biology, again, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I just knew where I didn't want to be, which was the pizzeria, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And as with a biology degree, there's a lot you can do with that. But everybody that I knew at the time who was majoring in biology was going to be a doctor. So I said, okay, I'll be pre-med. And that was a bad idea. Don't be pre-med unless you really want to be a doctor. Let's put it that way. So
yeah, you got to be dedicated for that, for sure. So Dominic, what do you see as the future prospects for your field? Can you share with us a little bit more about how COVID's impacted your area particularly? What do you see developing? Like, what trends do you see developing over the next couple of years that may be accelerated due to COVID?
There's a few questions in there. So let me break it down this way. So opportunity that I see in the industry today is probably around quantum computing, AI, artificial intelligence, and cloud computing. Okay, so in the technology space, that is where the technology industry is headed, right? It is around artificial intelligence, and the Internet of Things exists in our lives just by saying Siri or Alexa. That is the Internet of Things, right? We are all interconnected. In fact, my Fitbit is right now sending information to my phone, which is being uploaded to a cloud, right? That cloud has to be secured, right? So the IT industry is all about cloud, AI, data security, data protection, data privacy. and cybersecurity, and the list goes on and on. And quantum computing is that next iteration where, remember my example earlier about the desktop computer and the cell phone, take the power of our cell phones and all of the computations that it does to generate something, multiply that by 100 times, that's quantum computing. So when you think of something like COVID-19, how do you come up with solutions to fight the disease? Quantum computers are actually working on that in real time with the healthcare industry. COVID is not something we expected, right? It is certainly not something we planned for. The nice thing about IBM, and we've seen this, right? In some industries better equipped than others, right? But when we were told on March the 6th, plan to work from home for the next 2 weeks, none of us expected to be home 8 months later, but we were able to pivot and work from home because we're all on laptops, we're all interconnected with WebEx, or we use WebEx, this is Zoom, but web conferencing. And a lot of us have our mail and such on our phones. So for us to flex and move to a work at home environment was easy. The hard part is actually now existing at home or coexisting with our families and loved ones who are still home themselves. So all of a sudden, you know, the beautiful space that we had in an office has become a room in a house, if you're lucky and you're not sharing that with 5 or 6 other people. Really the big challenge for us from an industry standpoint is not so much how we shifted to home, but how do we get people coming back to the office, right? Because we do want people to come back to an office, but what we have learned in the 8 months is that working from home has its advantages, right? I don't have to commute anymore. I don't have to worry about fixing my lunch or buying lunch per se. I certainly don't have to worry about, you know, wearing a suit and tie, right? We're a lot more casual these days. But on the same token, you know, getting back to an office for purpose, right? So we envision post-pandemic when it's safe, and I underscore that word, when it's safe, to come back to an office for purpose. In the short term, you know, we've had employees at IBM that do have to go into the office. So we're not 100% remote. We have what we call our essential workforce, because there are things that the servers that that power the cloud sit in sites that have to be monitored, because if a server goes down, there's a human being that says, something's wrong, we got to fix it. So our essential employees are on site, and we've taken precautions to protect them as much as possible. So we mandate masks. We follow the accordance, you know, if I think of our Yorktown site, we follow the accordance of the New York State regulations. We mandate masks. We have temperature checks. We have employees filling out security forms before they come into work every day. It's on their phone that they show, and they say, if it's green, you can come in. If it's red, then you don't come in. But the challenge is going to be post-pandemic, when it's safe, to actually demonstrate a viable reason and need to resume a schedule to come back to the office. But we don't envision that to be 5 days a week. We'll expect and we'll embrace flexibility, right? And what we've said to our employees is where you hear this is the new normal, think of it as the new opportunity, right? Look at it glass half full, right? The pandemic has taught us a lot of different things, and we want to learn from that. And so let's take what we've learned, right? What works, because before you could have been in a job where you were coming in 5 days a week because that's what you did. And we've realized you don't have to do that 5 days a week, but there's opportunity when you come in. What's the purpose? What are you going to do? Whether it's socialization, whether it's a team meeting, whether it's a design thinking session, there's something to be done. But let's embrace the opportunity in front of us and think about how we can work together to move forward. Did I answer all those parts of the question?
Yes, you did. Very nicely, very nicely. Right. Yeah. So reflecting back on your time at Fordham, and try to remember yourself as a recent graduate, what are some of the challenges that you faced and how did you overcome them?
Well, like I said, when I graduated in 1994, I had no practical work experience. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I really wish I had spent more time at the career planning and placement office. And we had personality assessments, and I didn't really understand what they were telling me, right? Again, because it asks you for interests and you fill things out. I think one was Myers-Briggs. And I remember like the results being like, it said that I could be a truck driver, but I was missing the correlation, right? It wasn't being a truck driver. I like cars. I like driving, right? So maybe that was an indication to me to pursue something outdoors, not a job sitting behind a desk. So in 1994, there was no internet per se, right? The internet boom hadn't happened yet. And I didn't have enough experience. And like my friends were either becoming doctors, engineers, lawyers. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I really wish I had spent more time internalizing and reflecting on what I liked and what I didn't like. And it's a lot easier to figure out what you don't like. Not necessarily easy to figure out what you like, right? Because what we think we like, then we realize, well, maybe I really don't like that as much as I thought I did. But the key is to find what you like and what you enjoy and focusing in on that. And nobody really ever told me that. And I really wish they had.
So this sort of kind of goes hand in hand. So would that be the same advice that you wish you would have heard when you were first starting out as well?
Yes, absolutely. I wish somebody had said to me in my freshman year, spend as much time as you can at the career planning and placement office. Take advantage of internships, because that's the beautiful thing, is it's try and buy, right? And this is what I say to our interns who come on with us at IBM is why are you here, right? And I get the same answer time and time again. Well, IBM is a big company and I really want to explore and learn. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, but why are you here? Why IBM? IBM is one of 500, right? Fortune 500. There's 500 different types of big companies. Why IBM, right? And I press them and I press them and I press them, and I never get the answer that I'm looking for, right? Which is the internal personalized answer. So, whether it's information science, right? Or whether it's English, psychology, right? The degree. Why did you pick that degree? Why did you major in what you majored in, right? Was it because mom and dad were a teacher and I want to be a teacher? Was it because information technology, IT leads to high-paying jobs? What is it? Because if you pick a major that you don't like, but you do it because it's a lucrative opportunity, I'm telling you, your interests are going to catch up with you and you're not going to be happy. And when I was at St. John's and we were teaching interviewing and we were talking about interviews, we would say, I vividly remember painting this very bleak picture, right? And this was a crop of students that were finance majors, and they all wanted accounting majors. They all wanted to work for then the big six. I think it's like big three now. And I was like, think of this, right? Big six accounting firm, big three accounting firm, 60, 70, 80 hours, right? Finance major, investment banker, right? We watched the movie Wall Street and you see Michael Douglas and millions of dollars, right? But think about what an investment banker does. Think about the amount of hours that they work, right? 50, 60 hours a week, that is a lot of time, right? So you get what you pay for. And if you want to get up at, 4 a.m. to go work at Wall Street, and maybe now you're not commuting, but still the market never sleeps, right? So it's a 24/7 global economy. You're working, and even in IBM, right? We get paid for 40 hours. We don't work 40 hours. So, but you got to enjoy what you do, right? I think that is the key. Underscore it a million times. You have to enjoy what you do. And I get it, right? You guys graduated, you guys want jobs, you're starting off in your career. Your interests might change. I was asked recently by a recent grad, should I go get an MBA? And I say, why? And he goes, why not? And I say, why? Why do you want an MBA? He goes, don't I need one? I go, why would you think you need one? In fact, I would say employers will frown to some extent on students who go direct from undergraduate to graduate without the practical work experience to complement. And I said, how beautiful would it be for you to get a job in your industry or your major rather, He's a finance major. I said, how beautiful would it be for you to get a job and let the company pay for your MBA? Now there's a novel idea, right? Let somebody else pay for it. And he goes, companies do that? I go, yeah, well, not all of them. I said, some of them do. I said, hey, Starbucks offers free tuition to their baristas. So, you know, last I checked, that's not a bad deal in today's day and age, right? To get free education, right? But you got to start someplace, right? So, but again, if you got to start someplace, then you got to enjoy what you do, right? I hated working in the pizzeria. I hated it. I would come up with every excuse not to go work with my dad. I hated it. It was hot. He didn't have air conditioning. I didn't like it. I never got to hang out with my friends on Friday nights and Saturday nights because I was working. Didn't want to do it. So I knew what I didn't want to do, but nobody really told me what I wanted to do. And I never really thought about what I liked to do because I didn't have enough experience doing different things to learn about what I liked and didn't like. And that's the beautiful thing about internships, right? That they give you that. But even if you took advantage of it or you didn't take advantage, right? Figure out, think about, internalize, what are you good at? What are your skills, right? What do you need to improve upon, right? What skills are relevant today in any industry? Communication skills, analytical skills, presentation skills, relationship skills, okay? Because if you got those core, right, you can talk to somebody, you can present something, right? You can communicate, whether it's writing or whether it's in person, whether you can decipher data. I mean, you can't get away from data, whether you're a teacher, whether you're an IT professional, whether you're a finance analyst, you're not going to get away from data. You cannot hide from a spreadsheet. It is a part of our culture, right? Whether you're maintaining it for personal reasons, tracking your budget, or you're in a job where you're doing it day to day and building VLOOKUPs, okay? And you have to find where your passion is. And that's the beautiful thing is your passions could change, but inherently there's certain things that we gravitate to and things that we don't. And don't ever take a job in something that you don't want to do, because you're going to be miserable after the honeymoon period wears off, and there's always a honeymoon period. Because I've had them. I've had them with my experiences where the honeymoon period wore off, whether it was a job I took, and I'll share this. One of the jobs that I've hated most in my IBM career has been it was a program manager job, and it was what we call talent partner. And this was a strategic role that required me to come up with solutions to some of the issues facing the business. Great experience in hindsight. I hated every minute of it because it made me focus in on project management, and I hated project management. I still hate project management. But the 2 years that I spent in that job were the two most difficult years of my entire IBM career. I had my lowest performance ratings. I almost quit because I could not stand working in this type of role. It was the most rewarding job I had because the skills I learned in that job, I have taken forward with me and still apply today, almost 10 years later. And I encourage everybody today in IBM HR to do a role as a talent partner, and they all look at me funny saying, well, why would you do that? It's a shade of gray. I don't want to go work in a shade of gray. And I say, well, wait a minute. How beautiful is that to go work in a shade of gray? Because guess what? You don't have any boundary, right? If you work in a job that's very well defined, then you really can't step out of that. Those are very difficult environments to be in because you're not able to express yourself creatively. And and by the way, there's no reason that you ever take a job that you couldn't change the makeup of the job, depending on your contributions to the role, right? So I would say focus on your interests and passions, pursue them with vigor, understand where you don't want to go and don't gravitate to it, because when the honeymoon period wears off, you're not going to be happy.
Great points. And you even kind of covered some other questions that I had here, especially for those what are the skills that you need for entry level employment, because you were saying, and beyond, of course, because major doesn't always matter. It's the skill set that you have to offer the company and offer the position in the workplace. That's really important to highlight. So
Absolutely.
as an alum from Fordham Prep, Fordham undergrad, Fordham grad, so you know the value of the Fordham degree. How do you recommend the grads in this room make the most out of their network? Or how can they utilize their degree and their Fordham network to get the most out of their career?
Well, everything is a plan, right? Back to my example earlier, right? Project planning, right? So what's your plan, right? I'm going to say this, what's your plan? And so you know where you want to go. How are you going to get there? If you don't know where you want to go, well, then start talking to people, right? Again, back to your list. So Fordham gives you a tremendous amount of access to qualified professionals, teachers, professors, right? The career planning and placement office, your own student body, right? So, it's a beautiful thing to have a network. You all have networks, right? The 5 of you together, expand that, right? How many of us are here? 6, 8 of us together,
Okay.
right? Math isn't my best suit. But it's about pulling the levers, I always say, right? So where do you want to go and how do you want to get there, right? And your path might have a different variations, but talking to people, exploration is key and critical, right? So you majored in something, you spent the last 4 years majoring in it, you've built a network. You've built a network of fellow students, you've built a network of teachers, you've built a network of academic professionals that work at the university. Use that network, right? Take advantage of that network, right? And today we have a beautiful thing called LinkedIn that allows us to expand our network, right? But people don't necessarily use it effectively, right? Because LinkedIn has moved a lot away from being a job search engine and being more of an online presence, right? And so who are you, right? Because today's interconnected world is about who are you and what do you bring to the table? Because every employer is going to look for that, right? And while we may give preferential treatment, okay, if I was hiring and I have 2 resumes in my hand and one of them went to Fordham and one didn't, I might look at the Fordham one first, right? But if they're equal skill and capability, it doesn't mean that I'm automatically going to hire the person from Fordham, because again, what do you bring to the table, right? And believe it or not, as grads, you guys bring a lot to the table, right? You have innovative thinking. You're coming fresh out of academia and you have something to offer that someone like me that's been 20 some odd years removed from the college campus, right? I don't know what the latest and greatest is. You guys do. You guys have been there. You've been learning about it for the last 4 years, right? Do you want to go in for an advanced degree? Ask yourself, do you need the degree, right? Before you pursue that. That's a huge investment of time and money, right? And I'm sure you probably don't have a lot of either at the moment. So the key is, what do you want to do and where do you want to go, right? Someone said, I think it was Noel, you said you moved back to New York, which is great. Why'd you move back to New York? There's 49 other states, right? But why did you move back to New York? Something about New York attracted you to come back, right? Some people are leaving in droves, never to return. But think about your interests, think about your network. I can't underscore that word enough, your network, right? Use LinkedIn as a mechanism to demonstrate your professional demeanor, right? And professional demeanor is extremely important. So I'll give you guys a bit of advice and a little tip. Any employer today will do a search on you and will see what is your online presence. So be very mindful, okay? I'm not going to call anybody out, but be very mindful of your online presence, because sometimes it can work to your advantage. At other times it works to your disadvantage. I'll share a story of a friend of mine recently who was looking for an opportunity. He was a consultant at a pharmaceutical company and decided to venture on his own and get a job with a startup. And he took a risk. And unfortunately, the pandemic caused him to lose that job. So he started looking for other opportunities. He landed another opportunity with a smaller sized pharmaceutical company, and they made him an offer, and he accepted the offer and he was ready to start. And then they actually even sent him like a welcoming package. And about 2 days before his start date, they called him up and said, we have to pull the offer. And they didn't give another explanation as to why. They just said, we had to pull the offer, I'm sorry. And that was it, click. And he's scratching his head like, what just happened? I don't know what happened. He had a friend of his who, through his network, had a friend of his who worked at the company and said, hey, listen, this just happened to me. Can you tell me really what happened? Was it budgetary? I mean, look, the pandemic has caused a lot of different things, right? I get it. As it turned out, he had a podcast. He had a podcast where he was questioning something that this particular pharmaceutical company was sponsoring. He had questioned it. He had questioned it 2 years prior when he had nothing to do with this. He completely forgot about that podcast. They came across it. They didn't like what he said. They pulled it. Never would have known it. He called me up. He goes, do I have a case? I said, you have absolutely no case. I said, how can you prove that that's what they did? He couldn't prove it. So we move on. But I share that story to think about your online presence and be mindful of what you do online, because we're watching. Employers are watching. And at IBM, I can tell you, I've fired a number of individuals for violating business conduct, and they didn't even realize that they were doing it. But we have zero tolerance for them, because everything somebody does is a representation of the company. And so we don't want bad press, and we certainly don't want, people misrepresenting our values, our beliefs as an employer. So be mindful of that.
Absolutely. Like Instagram, social media, like your social media as well, like in addition to just not your podcast that you're participating in, like every little thing that you do, employers really do check that. I've heard that
Absolutely.
a bunch of times as well.
Absolutely.
And that's a really interesting story, because the individual didn't even put two and two together. It's like something you had to really kind of think about and be like, what's the deal here?
Yep. Yeah.
Wow.
I'll share another story real quick. We had, this is about 10, 12 years ago, where someone circulated a joke during Thanksgiving on an email, right? And we say, don't use email for work-related purposes, but look, we all do, right? So circulated a joke, made it all the way to externally to one of our clients who found it offensive. We fired the person, right? Now the person comes back and says, but I forwarded this joke every year around Thanksgiving. It was a Thanksgiving related joke. And like, yeah, well, this was the year that it caught up to you, right? So you just never know. And you're not thinking that way, but this is one of the reasons why they pay me to think that way, right? So
it's like on the job etiquette that you think or you should know, but you don't think that much about it, like sending a joke to a colleague or a teammate or something, and not really thinking like the etiquette is not to use your business email for those things. And nobody's really teaching you that, but the hope is that
Right.
Well, you've definitely hit all the areas that I had hoped that you would, between skill set and advice and leveraging your Fordham degree. So it's been wonderful hearing from you this evening. But I